gonna start this video right away. I got some new duty officers. I just got a blue one from a blue quality officer. I think he was advisor for instigating a defection. And now I have this rare person, a high quality, top-notch bartender, an El Arian, rescued from a temporal anomaly. So isn't that something? We got some colonists, and if you'll remember, I rolled the dice on whether we would get anything for this dilithium mining mission. Critical success. Tons of XP, tons of dilithium, and provisions, and fleet marks, and I don't know how close we are, but getting rank 2 on something would be nice. Not quite. Alright, I'm here at the Ferengi Trader. And I'm just going to continue on getting some XP here. But I did grab the local college paper, and there was an article in there that I wanted to make some comments about. Because, I don't know, sometimes I just see some weird stuff in there. And I want to go, what is this all about? And we're going to hold on to, let's see, I want to get these leaves. What's this one? 71%. Alright, let's do that. Cool. And we're on our way. See, I already got my spacesuit on. So we're gonna get some mining done. Let's return to ship. Yes, so the title of this article is Saskatchewan Professor Discusses Indigenous Scholarship at CSU by Charlotte Lang. And it goes, members of Colorado State University had the opportunity to learn about indigenous methodologies, scholarship, and research during a lecture held in the Laurie Student Center on September 26th. Now, I have several. It doesn't actually say a lot in the article about what any of these terms mean. It's kind of vague. But I have several assumptions. But before I get to those assumptions, we'll just continue. In order to properly recognize the scholarship of Indigenous peoples, there is a requirement to actually see the scholarship of Indigenous peoples. That is a meaningless statement. According to a presentation from Margaret Kovach, a professor of education at the University of Saskatchewan and author of Indigenous Methodologies, Characteristics, Conversations, and Contexts. Sounds like some postmodern woo to me, but who knows? I could be wrong. It's just kind of hitting the right notes, though. Quote, if we are to uphold Indigenous scholarship in Western University zones of contact, we must come up with policy and practices that allow us to do that. Zones of contact. Weird little terminologies. And what is Indigenous scholarship? Because I feel like when you ask the question to define what it means, that in and of itself is a Western, I am showing my Western biases. It's like, oh, can you explain what this means? Oh, explaining what it means is, you know. Anyways. In her lecture, Kovach, who is of Plains Cree and Salteau ancestry, I don't know French, Salteau, spoke about the research and scholarship of Indigenous peoples and proposed a framework on how such scholarship can be better recognized and accepted in universities. Kovach said Western culture and Indigenous culture have two different approaches to knowledge and scholarship. That might be why you might need separate institutions, honestly. But I'll explain why I feel that way in a moment. Let's step out the airlock. Oh, but first, turn on your spacesuit, because you don't want to die out there. Okay. So, Indigenous culture, Kovach said, is focused on a holistic and integrated way of looking at scholarship as opposed to a more Cartesian view of Western culture. Holistic. I don't know how to evaluate all of these claims. And I think the process of actually evaluating the claims is presumably like the Western thing. I don't know. I'm perhaps being too skeptical when I see this, but I see a lot of these things, and I'm like, I kind of feel like I know what's coming. I kind of feel like there's some critical theory that's involved in a lot of this. I see a lot of this woo-woo language, and here's the thing. If you're applying the critical theory, you're not really applying your own culture. It's just a bunch of, I don't know, it's basically like Marxist stuff. So it's like, how are you upholding your tradition while you're appropriating this to criticize another culture? I'm not saying that's necessarily the case. It says, ooh, there's another miner nearby, and he did not turn on his spacesuit. He was attacked by a vacuum. It did a number on him, too. You see that up in the chat log there? Anyways, I feel like there's all these indigenous courses and this thing and that thing, and if you are applying, like, that's fine. I don't object to that. I don't even know what it means. I don't necessarily have to. I might be curious about it, but as soon as I start hearing the critical theory and the woo, I go, well, you're kind of pretending to uphold and represent your culture, but what you're really doing is just having a go at the expense of my culture. And those aren't really the same thing. And the reason I'm making that assumption is I just see the lingual cues where things are very verbose. There's zones of contact and methodologies and all of this. Because when you make claims, truth claims about the way things are, and people are like, well, how do you know that? And you can basically say, I have my indigenous ways of knowing, and they should be authoritative. Like, if you have your own ways of knowing, that's fine. But if you want authority to operate in this society, I think that we have different standards. And I think that's a good thing. For example, if you have a theory, it needs to be falsifiable. And people need to say, well, is it framed in a way where it can be proved true or proved false? And how do we test it to make sure that it's not false? And that just seems reasonable to me. But if you have indigenous ways of knowing and you try to apply what I was just talking about to them, it's like fire and water. Apparently there shouldn't be an overlap there, which I guess is fine. However, if you want authority, I don't know where that gets you. Yeah, so I'm going to finish this mining, and I'm going to resume with the article. We have 3 more spots to mine here, and I'm going to just refresh my... yeah, just continue reading this. Indigenous ways of knowing. Indigenous methodologies. And your first question was, well, how do you define those? And it's like, well, we don't. You define things because that's what your culture does, but we don't really define things. We have a more holistic approach. I think you can understand my skepticism, but I'm not saying it's necessarily, like, wrong. It just seems like, why are you trying to do that in the university, where the university clearly has these, it has its way of doing things. That's how it's been productive. I don't know. So, it is important to be able to recognize the indigenous views of scholarship in universities, said Kovac. She referred to universities as contact zones, defined as places where cultures interact, clash, and grapple with each other, while also being places of potential for mutual recognition and healing. Contact zones are alive, evolving, and hopeful, Kovac said. Contact zones are also messy. Okay. I don't argue with anything there. I just... Why is the... I don't know, I'm not going to criticize the language either. Contact zones, I feel like I understand what you're getting at. I'm going to hold off on mining these rocks so I can read a little bit more. Kovac focused on supporting Indigenous faculty in achieving promotions or tenure, as standards for these are based on a Western understanding of what constitutes knowledge. In order to move past this, Kovac proposed a framework for recognizing Indigenous scholarship. So there's different rules for different people based on their backgrounds. I think that's a disaster. Once you break ground and you say, well, we can still give certificates, and basically what the university does is it trains you in different things, and it also certifies that you have attained the discipline. And it also defines what the discipline is. There's a curriculum. And if you fail to do that, or you decide that you can have a different curriculum based on your ethnicity, that is undermining the institution. And I don't think you can have the single institution with different standards for different people. It's just not going to work. And I'm not saying that your indigenous knowledges and your ways of practicing them are wrong. Just from reading this article, I don't even know what they are. However, why would it be unacceptable for you to just have your own institutions? I feel like if it's that different and you believe in its efficacy, have your own institution and go demonstrate the efficacy. Otherwise, you're just taking a stab at the institution and saying, well, we're excluded because, you're making us hit these math scores and explaining, and I don't even know if it's math scores, but just to, explain things. When you ask us to explain how do we know things, that's not what we do. We have a more holistic approach here, and it's like, well, then, I don't know, I'm just kind of exasperated with it. And I will finish this piece. I will finish reading it, and I don't know. I just don't understand what they're getting at, and all the language is very vague, and I think that's done deliberately. And so it sets you up for the punch. You're like, well, this is vague. I don't know what this means. And then when you ask that, it's like, well, you would ask what things mean because of your Western constructs. It's like, I feel like it's a little more universal than that. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. I'm going to finish this one, and then we have another asteroid to do. And I don't really have another article that I wanted to talk about. This is the main one. There was another opinion piece about cleanliness and how men need to step up their cleanliness because there's a stereotype that women are supposed to be cleanly, but men don't need to be cleanly. And what I appreciated about the article was how he was exhorting people to be cleanly. And I'm like, well, that's fine. But to say that there's some kind of, it's always on with this thing where it's like there's this, systemic oppression of women to make them take showers when men don't need to take showers and they have dirty rooms, but the women, okay, try bringing a woman over to your house and having your room and your house all messed up. I'm just saying, like, there are reasons why everybody should be clean, and I think just stretching. See, I'm talking about the article and laying my opinion, but I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read any parts of it to you. I just thought it was a little goofy. Just the whole framing around gender is like, well, now this is a piece worth of publishing because I've framed it around gender. But if you remove the gender element out of it, it would be very mundane. So now you can have these very mundane articles that don't really say anything, and they get published because I don't want to be mean to this guy. I didn't think it was like a terrible article or anything like that, but I'm just kind of tired of the cockamamie framing of men versus women and blah 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 blah. It's like, well, I think you're wrong about your assumptions there, and it just feels a little heavy-handed sometimes, where it's like in every avenue, men versus women and race versus race and indigenous versus west, blah 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 blah. Okay. We'll continue with this article. I'm just going to chill here. Let's see. In order to develop or enhance existing tenure or promotions, there needs to be an organized effort at the local university level with full participation of Indigenous peoples, both faculty and community, in partnership with university representatives. Kovacs said this framework would focus on principles, criteria, evidence, and adjudication that would support an indigenous scholarship. I'm not opposed to any of that, I just don't know what it means. For example, Kovac asked for weight to be given to oracy and oral dissemination of research. I don't know about that. Kovac also suggested invitations to share knowledge in various community processes, as well as in public and academic venues. Invitations to share knowledge. A seat at the table. What are the kinds of things we need to see that demonstrate that Indigenous scholarship will happen according to our principles and benchmarks, Kovac said. Well, we don't know what they are, so that would help. Sitan Christensen, a second-year master's student at CSU, said it's important to describe... Hold on. Contact traffic control. It's important to describe that there is a pathway and to recognize that it won't happen on its own in a pre-established system. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe you're asserting yourself in places where it's not appropriate, honestly. I mean, it's possible. But then again, I don't know exactly what you're talking about. But I just assume that there's going to be some critical theory evolved and some finger wagging and some shame-mongering. And, like, if it was actual, like, studies in your own culture and not tinged with this Marxist horseshit, then I would actually be very interested. But I very much doubt that that is the case. I feel like we want a seat at the table so we can talk to people about their privilege. Get the fuck out of here. Tired of it. Nonsense. But maybe I'm jumping to conclusions. I doubt it. I think that's exactly what this is about. And let's see. It's impossible to create programs and processes. It is possible to create programs and processes. But you can't expect that to happen in a Eurocentric system. Casual aspersions. Another second-year CSU master's student, Marcel Jardaleza, asked how the university is supporting its graduate students. I'm glad that CSU is offering opportunities and events like this, but I'm wondering how much of it is actually being considered. Well, what is there to consider? It seems you want to have a theory, and you want it to resist definition, and it shouldn't be accountable. It should be within a system that has these principles, but we get to have our separate principles because of our ethnicity. And if you try to hold us accountable to your principles, we're just going to say that it's Eurocentric and it doesn't represent us. However, we're going to take a seat at the table and we're going to tell you what's up. And the argument doesn't work back the other way, does it? I don't know. I just swear this thing is... I would put money on the table. I'd just be like, yeah, let's see what your methodologies and your criticisms are and all of this and what your criteria is. And I would put money on the table that it's going to be just a bunch of postmodern woo, a bunch of critical theory, a bunch of oppressor-oppressed nonsense. And it's like, why would you would sacrifice an opportunity to have a course about your heritage and your experience and what you value, and you're just gonna brush that in with this common enemy political game. And it's like you're cheapening your culture, you're cheapening my culture. Everything is cheapened by this when it gets involved. Now I'm gonna listen to this again and see what I think of it, because I know I just kind of rambled and I made a lot of assumptions, but it's hard not to make a lot of assumptions when you're reading something like that and it just uses some of this kind of verbose language, and you're like, what exactly does that mean? What is a contact zone? What are these methodologies that you're talking about? What are these principles that you're talking about? And I'm almost positive that once those principles and methodologies are laid out, I'm not allowed to say anything about them because I'm a white person. And that's what this is. That's what's really at the bottom of this. And that you need to get a seat at the table so that you can have authority or the semblance of authority for what is basically the semblance of scholarship. And now I could be wrong. I could be woefully wrong about this. But again, I would throw money on the table. I'd be like, as soon as I see this curriculum, I know I'm going to see a bunch of this critical theory stuff. And when I see it there, I'm done. I just wash my hands of it. Because it's just boring and it's predictable and it's not interesting and it's also very counterproductive. So I'm going to finish up mining here. That's what I had to say about that. Anything else? It's gotten cold. It feels like fall now. It is the 1st of October and it's like somebody threw a switch. I'm wearing my warm pants today. And I got to see everybody's stylish fall clothes, which was cool. I like fall. What I don't like is the really short days, and I don't like losing daylight. I don't mind the cold. I actually, in a lot of cases, prefer the cold. Oh, I didn't make my score. Womp, womp, womp. But yeah, fall's great, and I'm not a huge fan of horror. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed horror. I would never consider myself like a horror buff or anything like that, but yeah, I enjoyed a good scary movie. I saw the It miniseries, and I think I was 10 or 11 years old when I saw that for the first time, and I thought it was terrifying. And then I went, wait, that's the guy from Muppet Treasure Island. This ain't so scary. But for a couple years there, after I saw that thing, I was like, that is the scariest movie. Oh my goodness. And then I saw the new one, was it last year, a couple years ago, and I thought they did a pretty good job. It was a little jarring and abrasive with the jump scares and, you know, sitting in a theater, but they actually kept very close to the book, from what I remember, which is a tome. It's a very long book. But I do appreciate the works of Stephen King. Halloween time, man. I didn't really dress up last year. I just got like a mask. I didn't really do anything special. This year, I don't know if I'll do anything. Maybe. But I figure if you're going to dress up, I'm not going to wear the same thing that I wore last year. I got to get something else. So I'll probably just do what I did last year and just stroll into Life of the Party or Walmart or something like that and grab something off the shelf and go, hey, I'm participating. Yeah, Halloween was more fun as a kid, because I know that people have Halloween parties, but it's not really a holiday that you get time off for, and it's not something I like request time off around so I can go to. But like, if there was a fun Halloween party, I'd be down. Last one I went to, I think, was like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 2016. I went to a Halloween party, and it was a lot of fun. But yes, the seasons change. One more. We're almost there. Let's see. What else is there to talk about? I got nothing. I don't really want to talk about, but I did see something briefly on YouTube. Somebody was talking about a potential comeback for Hillary Clinton stepping in to throwing her hat in to contend for the presidency. I hadn't heard anything about that before. I don't know how I feel about it now. And it probably won't happen, but people are speculating that it will. So that's what's happening in the reality TV show that is our politics. Now, this guy mining next to me, is he a real person or is he one of these NPCs? Because there was a real guy out here. Phony. he saying something? Sounded like a little voice communicator going. Speaking some alien language. There's another one. Well, there you have it. Those are my thoughts of the day. Yeah, I just like grabbing that local paper, or the college paper, every now and then. And they have articles in there that are satire, and it's supposed to be very obviously satire. But sometimes, just with how hysterical, especially these hippie gumbo people get, these very progressive people, I can't tell whether it's real or not. So I get to the end of it, and then I check back, and I'm like, who wrote this, and what is this? And then I see in the notes it says, oh, this is satire. They don't put it like under like a satire section. It's just kind of in the editor's notes right when they start it. So I appreciate those, and they get me. They fool me a lot, because I'm just like, I could 100% believe that people are doing this cockamamie, whatever it is, on campus. And then you realize, oh, you're trolling me. So, anyways, until next time.